The storm track is about to become quite active, so let's discuss where it is headed and who might see the most snow in today's update. A very warm welcome to all of you, and a happy Sunday to you, November 23rd. We are certainly getting closer to the official start of winter. With that in mind, I am seeing a very sharp boundary setting up over the next 10 days or so, which I believe will bring a great deal of winter weather for some folks and a lack of it for others. Some of us will need to wait a little longer, but I do expect that as we move through December, many more of you will begin to experience some snow and winter weather. Unfortunately, this pattern will likely also include some ice and other more challenging types of winter precipitation mixed in as well. Now, if you are new to our channel, I want to extend a warm welcome. My name is Gerald, and I am a meteorologist with WCCB in Charlotte. If you find these updates helpful, I would encourage you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also select the notification bell to stay informed of the latest forecasts. These actions are completely free of charge. It does not cost you a penny, nor does it enroll you in any kind of service. Doing so simply helps you stay informed and allows me to continue providing these updates. For all of you who are already subscribed, who like the videos, and who join us regularly, your support truly means the world to me, and I am sincerely grateful for each and every one of you. I feel that gratitude, especially as we begin this Thanksgiving week. All right, let's transition to the weather details. We will begin with a brief overview, and then we will look at the forecast leading up to Thanksgiving. After that, we will discuss the significant weather boundary that is developing and talk about the outlook beyond the holiday. All right, what you are looking at here is information from the European Ensemble model. This is one of our most reliable forecast tools, and it is showing potential snowfall over the next 10 to 15 days. You can clearly see these paths of snow beginning to appear on the map, which suggests we are heading into a very active storm track during that period. This pattern will likely bring some very significant snowfall totals to certain areas. As for the exact locations, we will explore that as we continue through our discussion today. However, before we focus too much on the potential for heavy snow about 10 days from now, I want to first discuss the weather we are experiencing right now and how it will affect our Thanksgiving forecast. Please remember, Thanksgiving is only about 4 or 5 days away, so our confidence in that particular forecast is becoming much higher. The main weather feature at the moment is a large low-pressure system situated directly over the Four Corners region. This system is expected to generate a storm that will travel across the country between now and about Wednesday or Thursday of this coming week. It has the potential to produce some rainfall, possibly some severe weather, and snow for some areas. This is because a separate stream of energy from the north, currently located over Washington state, will attempt to merge with it, which could bring snow to certain locations. So, that is the general weather pattern we are currently observing. Now, if we look at the current radar, we can see this is not the only weather system at play. You will also notice another dip in the jet stream, which is helping to form what we call a clipper system, and that is bringing some snow today to parts of the northeast. Let me show you what I mean, and we will begin there. A considerable shield of snow is visible if you are watching from Ottawa, and especially for areas west of Montreal, moving down through the St. Lawrence River Valley and into Watertown. This includes areas in New York and Cornwall. Many communities are receiving this widespread precipitation. As a result, it is a rather snowy day in upstate New York, Vermont, and New Hampshire. For those in the interior of New England, while I would not necessarily call it lucky, it certainly has not been warm by any means. I am reminded of the classic movie White Christmas, where they are waiting for snow at a resort in Vermont. I do not believe the situation is quite that dire, as they are not wondering where winter is gone. While it is not that extreme, there is nonetheless some winter weather occurring today. Now, for those of you in the southeast, it has simply been warm. However, most of us are experiencing a slight cool down today compared to yesterday. Here in Charlotte, we broke numerous temperature records, reaching 80 degrees. That figure may even be revised to 81 degrees, which, as I mentioned, surpassed many daily records. The old record was 76 degrees. So for those of you in other parts of the country, that gives you an idea of the warmth we have been experiencing. So this warmth is present for some of us, but certainly not for everyone. And looking at the broader map, you can see that next system developing down in the Four Corners region with that southern stream of energy, while the northern stream of energy is currently over the Pacific Northwest. Alright, let's track the movement of these systems. We will now discuss the forecast from today through Thanksgiving, and then we will analyze the significant pattern change expected after the holiday, which could create an active track for winter storms. Let's look at the very latest model data, which is just now becoming available as we speak. We will go ahead and walk through the forecast together. Alright, looking ahead to later today, the main weather story in the eastern United States is that Clipper system, which you can see is bringing a respectable band of snow, or at the very least, some snow showers. For some, these may even feel like snow squalls across portions of New York State, Vermont, and New Hampshire. I also believe the Hudson Valley could see some snow from this system. I would not be surprised, so do not rule out the possibility that this evening, more so than overnight, some of that snow could attempt to move into Massachusetts. It is possible that places like Boston could receive some wet snowflakes, which would certainly not be surprising. You can see the forecast model is indicating a little of that snow trying to move in. While it would not be a major impact, it could definitely be enough to coat the grass for people as far south and east as Boston. However, for those located further inland, it could be a notable little winter event, particularly in the higher terrain. We could see 3 to 5 or more inches of snow there. The lower elevations, however, will receive less accumulation, making it more of a novelty than what I would consider an impactful storm as it moves through into the overnight hours. Meanwhile, you can see the next storm system beginning to move toward the east. We are seeing rain in Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and Nebraska, and that system continues its eastward track. By the time we reach Monday afternoon, it looks to be a rather rainy day. It appears that southeastern Oklahoma, parts of the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas, and much of the state of Arkansas, including Little Rock, will be experiencing a very rainy day. We will need to watch for some severe weather on the southern edge of this system, where warmer, more unstable air could fuel some stronger thunderstorms. I do see that potential. We've already seen some severe weather in that part of the country recently, and this system will continue to work its way east. According to the forecast model, this is the outlook for Monday evening. You can see a good deal of that rain slowly moving to the east, so while it may not be a high-impact event, it will certainly bring some needed rainfall at the very least. Now, let's look at this system from a wider perspective. Here it is developing, and you will notice that by the time we get to Monday, we have both the northern and the southern streams of energy in play. Now, the southern stream is moving much more quickly, so it is getting ahead of the northern polar jet stream. This separation is what will prevent this particular system from developing into a major snowstorm. Nonetheless, the two systems will still exist. They will simply remain separate instead of merging together to form a larger, more powerful storm that could produce significant snow. As you can see here, moving into the overnight hours from Monday into Tuesday, I expect North Dakota will receive some snow, and it is possible that northern Minnesota could also see some snow. Much of Montana will see precipitation as well, while rain will be falling across the eastern United States. Again, by Tuesday, there will not be much winter weather outside of the far northern tier of the country. And as we continue the forecast forward into Tuesday night, on Wednesday, we are expecting significant rainfall across the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic, and into portions of the Southeast. Meanwhile, substantial snow is anticipated in Minnesota, and I believe even Minneapolis could see some snowflakes beginning overnight on Tuesday. As the system continues to move eastward, we arrive at Thanksgiving morning. The good news is that the main storm will have mostly passed, but this is when the lake effect snow mechanism will begin to intensify. This really marks the beginning of a more active weather pattern for many of us. As you can see on the map, there is a large low-pressure system, and behind it, all of that wintry weather is beginning to move in from the Great Lakes. You may also notice this 540 line, that first blue line dipping southward, which indicates we are looking at a much colder Thanksgiving than we might have anticipated just a week or so ago for much of the eastern United States. This colder air will also affect the central United States, and it appears this chill will linger for some time. You can observe that block of cold, blue air marching into the region, and then you will see the weather map become much more active as we move past the Thanksgiving holiday. So, let's discuss this further. We will break down this changing pattern, show you precisely how it is expected to evolve, and identify which areas have the highest probability of seeing snow. Here is the significant pattern change that is on its way. Now, for the next couple of days, conditions will remain relatively warm for most of us. You can see those orange colors indicating an area of high pressure, holding firm over the eastern United States. Then, our Thanksgiving system arrives, bringing that large area of colder, blue air with it. This will bring a significant push of cold air for nearly everyone in the east, with the possible exception of Florida. Regardless, it will certainly feel colder than it does right now across the board. This pattern also generates lake effect snow, but it will be rather transient, meaning it moves into the area and, moves out quite quickly. Following that, the true pattern change will begin to take shape, and this will happen toward the end of the upcoming weekend. So, in about 7 days or so, as we head into the start of December, it appears a deep trough, which is another large area of cold air, will settle over the west. This, in turn, will build up a ridge of warmer air here in the east, establishing a very active storm track. This setup creates a scenario where these different air masses will clash, generating significant atmospheric lift. We are likely to see multiple low-pressure systems form and travel, generally speaking, along this specific track. This path will likely begin in the desert southwest and then travel up through the Central Plains into the Ohio Valley and finally toward the northeast. On one side of this track, we will see very wintry, cold conditions with the potential for both snow and ice. On the other side, conditions will likely remain wet but warmer, and with a setup like this in the middle and upper levels of the atmosphere, we could even see some thunderstorms on the horizon. As this pattern continues to develop, folks, I know many of you in the East are wondering when a major winter storm might arrive. I do want to caution everyone that it is still very early in the season, but my forecast still points toward a snowy December. However, for that to happen, the ridge of high pressure in the east must break down. As you can see on the forecast model, it finally begins to do so once we get past the first week of December, and this timing is consistent with our expectations. When we examine the larger global patterns or teleconnections and other contributing factors, this forecast aligns quite well, and I will show you that information toward the end of our discussion today. By that time, about a week into December, instead of these storms tracking sharply to the north, I believe we will see them follow a slightly different path. This new track will likely move more from west to east rather than from the southwest to the northeast, which is the pattern we expect to see frequently over the next 10 days or so. Alright, that is the outlook for the middle levels of the atmosphere, and as I mentioned, this will establish an energetic boundary that is very likely to form. First, here comes the Thanksgiving system. You can see we have some atmospheric spin or vorticity moving into the region. After that system passes, we expect to see successive rounds of energy that will travel along this established boundary. My apologies, I was looking at the incorrect model time for a moment. As we advance the forecast, you can see the large trough of low pressure. It dips southward into the country, and you can see how these individual disturbances are scooped up by the jet stream. For instance, a system starts down in New Mexico and then eventually travels up into the Midwest. That is just one piece of atmospheric energy. As we continue to look forward, the forecast models currently show more of this same general storm track. So, with a pattern like this in place, what might that actually look like in terms of the radar and the impacts on your community? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at that now. We will then analyze the chances for snow and ice associated with this pattern. Finally, we will conclude by examining the much longer range forecast deeper into the month of December. We will begin with the European forecast model. After that, I will show you the American GFS model. By looking at both, we can get a more complete picture of what this weather pattern could look like. Moving forward in time, we see that lake effect snow arriving right after, or more accurately, even during the Thanksgiving holiday itself. That activity is expected to last through Black Friday. Then, as the overall weather pattern shifts, it appears a clipper-type system may develop. This would be around Black Friday and into the following day, Saturday. It would not surprise me to see some snow from this in the Midwest and the Northern Plains. We will certainly be watching to see how that system evolves. It will be trying to move eastward while the cold air is still in place. However, what starts to occur is the evolution of that next major weather pattern. That large trough of low pressure will be settling in out west, which in turn builds the ridge of high pressure in the east. Therefore, while that clipper system could produce snow in the Northern Plains and Midwest, we will have to wait and see how it progresses. It is possible it could try to move into the Northeast, but at this moment, the forecast data does not support that outcome. Of course, the data is always subject to change, so it is wise to be proactive and anticipate what might shift. We will continue to monitor the situation. Perhaps that system will track farther east. In any case, that primary boundary does become established. And take a look at this. A very strong frontal boundary sets up, bringing a great deal of rain to the south, including southern Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. But if you look to the north of that line, from Denver to areas as far south as perhaps Kansas City and into Iowa, you will see rounds of snow and ice. This will mark the beginning of December and even the very end of November, right around the 30th of the month. And this very same weather pattern looks to continue. Take a look here, by the 1st of December. Now, I want to be clear, this is quite far out in the forecast period, so please do not take this as a certainty. For that reason, please do not focus on the specific details for your exact location, but rather look at the overall theme. That theme is the continuous flow of energy along this boundary. You can see these small, low-pressure systems here. Here is one of them, and here is another. There is likely another one forming right in this area. They all travel along that boundary, pulling warm, humid, and stormy weather into the southeast, while bringing colder, Arctic air to the north. This results in snowy and icy conditions farther up into the plains. You can see those rounds of snow and ice continuing to move through the region. You will also notice that the rain-snow line initially starts quite far to the north, and it sets up on what we would call a very diagonal axis. Now, as we look further down the road, you will notice the storm track begins to level out just a bit. And please keep in mind, we are looking quite far into the future, so we are focusing on the general pattern, not the exact details. This new path takes them a little more toward the northeast, and that would increase the chances for winter weather for all of our friends in the Midwest and the Northeast. It would likely remain quite warm and unsettled in the southeast, but then again, we are only talking about early December. So for those of you farther south, we do not typically expect snow this early in the season, and our weather history certainly supports that. Now, let's also take a look at another one of our trusted models, the GFS, so we can compare the information. I will give you a brief overview of what this particular model is showing, and at first glance, it looks quite similar. You can see that same system beginning to take shape right here. However, the GFS model intensifies this clipper system, making it much stronger. You can see it projects a good deal more snow for places like Chicago, Wisconsin, and Michigan, extending as far south as central Indiana about 6 or so days from now, before it begins to weaken as it moves into the northeast. But you can see the same general idea is there, folks. It is that same boundary that continues to bring waves of winter weather. The setup is a little different from the European model, and to be perfectly honest, the GFS has had some inconsistencies this season. For example, the GFS model is showing a hurricane hitting Florida on December 5th. Now, as we all know from a climatological standpoint, that is highly improbable for that time of year. So, while the GFS shows the same general pattern, I believe the European model is handling the specific details a bit more accurately at this time. Alright, so those are the individual computer models, which are based on complex physics. Now let's look at what we call the ensembles, which are collections of many model runs, and I will show you how they align quite well with this forecast. Then, we will briefly discuss how this pattern could evolve later in December. What you are looking at here is the probability of accumulating snowfall within a 24-hour period. This information comes from our Ensemble data, which is one of the most reliable tools we have for looking at long-range weather patterns. It can even be quite helpful for short-range forecasting as well. Alright, let's put this into motion. So what does this map show us? Well, here comes that first system early in the week. Just as we discussed, it could bring some snow to North Dakota and Minnesota, and that is reflected here. Then, the lake effect snow machine will get going right on time for Thanksgiving. It appears we are going to see a white Thanksgiving for some folks in Michigan, Cleveland, Erie, Buffalo, and Watertown, the areas we typically watch this time of year. Those locations look to be the most likely to experience that snowy Thanksgiving. Following that, here comes the clipper system that signals the pattern change. This brings fairly good chances for snowfall, as I mentioned, about 1 week from now for Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, and back down into the Dakotas. Nebraska and the Rockies also look to get a good amount of snow during that same period. After that system passes, the main boundary stays in a similar position. Now, I want you to notice what begins to change. We start to see this diagonal snow track develop. To the north of that black line, you have chances for snow, while to the south, the chances are much lower. And when I say snow chances, it is important to note that this could include snow or ice, which we will look at in just a moment. But then, that storm track begins to flatten out as we move about a week or so into December. You can see how the track starts on a diagonal path, but then levels out as it moves toward the northeast. As we head deeper into December, I believe that snowline will gradually shift to the east and south, slowly but surely bringing more people into the winter weather picture as the month progresses. Now, looking at the GFS Ensemble, which is the same type of tool, just from a different model, it shows general agreement. We see that same diagonal start to the storm track, and then it also attempts to flatten out a bit more as we go deeper into the month. That is the consensus for now. Now, I want to show you something else. It is important that we do not just focus on the potential for snow with this particular setup. This type of pattern strongly indicates the presence of shallow Arctic air, which means there is a very dense, cold layer of air close to the ground. And that shallow cold air can create the perfect conditions for ice. So what is the chance of seeing freezing rain or sleet? Well, it remains quite low for the next week or so, but then I want you to watch how that signal begins to grow. This is for the period around the last day of November and the beginning of December. You can certainly see the potential for icy conditions beginning to appear in the forecast. This is something we will need to monitor very closely with this developing pattern. Alright, so it is certainly looking like an active period ahead. We are finally beginning to see some true winter weather to discuss. But I know some of you may be watching from places like Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, and perhaps the Carolinas, and you might be wondering, what about us? When might we see some winter weather? Well, without getting into the day-to-day specifics, let's take a look. Let's take a broader look at some long-range signals that suggest your time could come closer to Christmas and New Year's. One of my favorite tools for this involves looking at large-scale atmospheric patterns, or what we call teleconnections. The two most important for us are the MJO and the NAO. The MJO stands for the Madden-Julian oscillation. In simple terms, it is a large wave of thunderstorms and rising air that travels eastward along the equator, circling the entire globe on a slow journey that takes about 30 to 60 days. Over the years, researchers have learned how to track this wave, and we have discovered that its location can significantly influence our weather here in the United States. For our purposes today, focusing on winter, we know that Phase 7, Phase 8, and Phase 1 of this oscillation are the phases that most often bring colder temperatures to our country. Now, if we look at Phase 7, you will notice that a ridge of high pressure can still bring some warmth to the southeast, but cold air really begins to move into the plains. And wouldn't you know it, that is precisely the phase we are forecast to enter as we begin the month of December. This matches up perfectly with what the computer models were just showing us, and it is always reassuring when different forecasting tools point to the same conclusion. Now, Phase 8 is typically the coldest phase of all. That particular pattern can bring cold air all the way from Florida to Texas and from Maine to the Dakotas, while the West stays warmer. Then there is Phase 1, where that southeastern ridge can sometimes try to build back in, but colder air generally holds on across the plains, the Northeast, and the Ohio Valley. So, with that in mind, which phase are we in right now? Well, looking at the data for today, November 23rd, we can see that we are currently in Phase 6. The pattern has been lingering in this particular phase for a little while now. We were in it, and we started to approach Phase 7, but then the progression of the MJO slowed down. However, all indications are that right at the start of the month, we will see a change. As we reach the very end of this month and head into December, we are going to move solidly into Phase 7. And if you recall, Phase 7 is the one that brings significant cold into the plains, which is exactly what our forecast models are showing. So you can see why this is such a valuable long-range tool. Now, when might we see Phase 8, which is the coldest pattern? The models are currently suggesting that could happen right around the middle of the month and continue on toward the Christmas holiday, time period where we could enter what is known as Phase 8. Now, there are different variations of Phase 8, and I should mention, if our forecast models show a weaker pattern like this one here, the outcome would be less exciting for winter weather fans. That would indicate a weaker Phase 8, meaning the pattern would be less amplified. However, you will notice that many of our computer models project a very strong Phase 8. That scenario would truly increase the chances for winter storms in the eastern United States as we go into the end of December. So, I know many of you in the southeast are experiencing that area of high pressure. My advice would be to enjoy the pleasant weather while it is here, because I genuinely believe that by the second half of December and through at least January, our chances for colder air outbreaks will begin to increase significantly. And naturally, that will increase our chances for winter weather. So, to my friends in that part of the country, I would simply say not to lose faith just yet. There is one more long-range indicator I would like to look at, and that is the NAO. Now, what does that mean? What am I referring to? And what is the forecast for it? Well, let's take a look at it together. The NAO, or the North Atlantic Oscillation, has two distinct modes, whereas the pattern we just discussed has 8 phases. This one only has 2. There's a positive phase and a negative phase. And if you are hoping for significant winter weather in the east, you want a strong negative phase. This is the type of pattern that develops when we have a negative NAO. You get a large ridge of high pressure building up toward Greenland and another large ridge over Alaska and into the western United States. What that does is create a buckle in the jet stream, and as we know, what goes up must eventually come down. So, whenever the jet stream rises significantly over Alaska and Greenland, it must dip down in between those two areas. That dip allows the jet stream to funnel a large path of Arctic cold southward, Generally speaking, we often see a similar effect over in Europe as well. At this time of year, that pattern establishes a favorable storm track, which would lead to chances for snow farther south and for many more people throughout the eastern United States. Now, it does not always set up in this exact perfect formation, but that is the general principle of what a negative NAO does. So what is going to happen with it? Well, from now through about the end of the month, the NAO is forecast to be quite positive. That is the reason why this next large push of cold air is going to be focused out west instead of here in the east. Now, we are still going to get that Thanksgiving cool down, but the longer range pattern I showed you for the end of the month will likely deliver that cold air more into the plains than into the southeast and the eastern United States, due to the strong positive NAO. As we get deeper into December, however, in about a week or so, you can see that many of the models begin to trend downward. We have a growing number of models, shown here in red, that indicate the NAO may start to turn negative again, which would be very good news for snow lovers here in the eastern United States. Please keep in mind, this is still for early December, so that does not necessarily mean that Charlotte, Atlanta, or Birmingham are going to see snow. However, it is promising news for folks in the Ohio Valley and the Northeast, where climatologically, it is a little easier to get snow during this time of year. So, that is the general forecast I am seeing at this time, my friends. To summarize and offer some final thoughts, we are expecting a cold Thanksgiving for most of the country, no matter what. We should also see some significant lake effect snow, meaning a white Thanksgiving is likely for people in those particular regions. After that, we will likely see a brief warm-up in the southeast, but it will become quite cold and wintry across the plains. That same pattern will then slowly evolve eastward into the Midwest and the Northeast as we progress through the first week of December. And then, looking ahead to later in the month, I believe, and my thinking on this has been quite consistent, that the further into December we get, the better the pattern looks for everyone in the eastern United States, at least in terms of the chance for winter weather. Now, just because there is a chance for an event does not mean it is guaranteed to happen. However, the more chances you have, the more statistically likely it becomes that you will eventually get one of those events. So, that is my perspective on the situation. That is what I have for all of you on this wonderful Sunday. On a personal note, I will be participating in the Monroe Christmas Parade today. So, if you are out and about in the Monroe, North Carolina area, you will see me on the WCCB Charlotte float. Please feel free to say hello. After the parade, you can catch me on WCCB News tonight at 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock, as well as on ABC Columbia at 11 o'clock. It is certainly shaping up to be a busy week ahead. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Please stay safe, and I will see you all again very soon.